Okay, so let's move on here. So constants are just a read-only variable. In PHP, that's done with define value and whatever value you want to put in it. You're not going to use constants very much, so we'll just kind of go over it quickly. So we're calling it value, and basically we can go, and this is all just standard variables and stuff like that. There's nothing strange going on there. You can use the constant, and it's uppercase because that's just a standard for constants to be uppercase. And what winds up happening is that all works okay. Okay, so here we get an error that says using a variable before initializing, interesting, and then an uninitialized variable plus constant. Okay, line 48. So I have a couple of errors here. So that shows you how the errors happen. Num is not initialized. Nothing doesn't exist. Those are some extra things I threw in. Simply get rid of. Oh, also, if you same thing as with JavaScript, you can't break a string onto 2 lines. So those are some examples of errors. Always initialize variables before they're used, just like in JavaScript. All the PHP keywords are there. We're going to go through them all. Arrays are similar to JavaScript with brackets. The arrays will automatically grow as well. PHP is not object-oriented, so instead of having a length method on arrays, you actually have to use a function called count. So in the for loop here, in JavaScript you'd say first.length, but in PHP you have to and it's count, and you put in the array that you want to get a length of. So it doesn't have properties. Not truly object-oriented. You can create arrays in multiple different ways, just like you can in JavaScript. You can use non-index values as long as they're unique. I don't know if we covered that in JavaScript or not. So third sub Amy, sub Bob, sub Carol. As long as these values in here, these keys in here are unique, you can do that. It doesn't have to be an integer. Although most people generally prefer to use the integer. And then the for loop's a little more complicated, though, if you don't use an integer, because you've got to go through some extra functions for resetting it back to the top and pulling the keys out of the values. I don't generally recommend doing it this way myself, but you can. Here's another array, type of array, and it's the same sort of thing. It's using a unique character index. So this is the index January, and this is the actual value, February and value. So this is the index or the key, and this is the value. There's a specialized type of for loop, just like there is in JavaScript, for dealing with these type of what they call them iterations. It's a little easier to go through it and look at all of them. Looks just like that. See where we're okay, good. So let's take this guy right here. See how long that takes. Could take a while. Not quite yet. Okay. PHP 4. Okay. Let's look at for PHP 4. Where is it? There it is. Okay. So this more or less shows you the same example there, giving it some values, and then it's printing everything else. So you look at, here's a lot of PHP that's going on, and then if we look at the actual output, though, we're not going to see any of that PHP. We're just going to see the result. Again, just see the result. Let's skip ahead a little bit because I want to get to the database stuff before we run out of time. There's some other examples here about comparing things and pattern matching that is probably too much to know, so I'm going to leave that alone. You get certain variables, and these are important to know. The most important two are actually get and post, because when you submit something on a form, it's the get and post that actually is the variables and how they get sent. And we'll see how that works in a moment. This particular one, I'm going to go over because it's too complicated. This shows a form. And the reason I'm gonna skip that is because their way of doing it is too complicated. I've got a simpler version. Although I think this thing. In this particular example is actually pretty good. Query a database, and it's going to be dated at HTML. So we'll go through the first one here. Okay. So we're going to look at this one. And this data.html is just pure HTML. There's nothing to it at all. HTML, the important thing to look at, and you've done forms before, method equals post, which means we're going to send the information over the post, and it's going to go to database.php, which is really what's going to query the database and give us results. Now we've got a couple of options we can query. In this particular case, we're going to query. We can either do everything, list out just the ID, just the title, company, or ISBN. So let's look at what happens when we click on everything. Error message. Books doesn't exist. Oh, okay. I see what I need to do. Hold on for just a second. Okay. Let's take a look at it now. So when I click Query, Submit, I get a bunch of data back. Let's look at what's really going on here. So it submits to this right here, database.php. And we said by post. So we said right here, we said go to database.php, and the method is post. So we had our post variable right here, which we discussed earlier, and it's an array that basically has all of the variables sent from the prior web page to this web page as a post, which means all the form variables. So if we look at this, it's going to send us select and submit. This is not much to it. We send us select and submit. The extract $post, what that basically does is it loops through that array. It extracts each element in there, each row in there, and creates a PHP variable by the same name. So it takes select and creates a PHP variable called $select. Same thing with submit. And what I'm doing in here is I'm creating a query as a string, select, whatever we send it, and this select is going to be whatever's from that list, the asterisk or whatever else we have. So that value for $select is going to be the asterisk, ID, title, category, or ISBN. It's going to concatenate it to the SQL statement, so this is going to look like select star from books. Here we just simply say connect to a MySQL database on localhost. Root is the user and there's no password. Then we select our test database. That's where all this stuff is. Then this checks to see if the query, so we pass into there the query, and it will simply execute that query. If there's any results, meaning if it found anything, those results will be stored in this variable, which is essentially an array, two-dimensional array. If any of these return a failure, then they're going to die, basically what it says there. And die basically just means print this message and end the program. We're done. Don't go any further. Okay, but assuming it all succeeds, we want to close our database. And then this thing is using a for loop to go through each one of the rows in the query, and it's basically going to print them. It's going to print an HTML table. Prints the TR, prints each column between TD tags, prints a closed TR. And then the rest of it from here on down is mostly just more HTML. If we look at this and we do a view source, again, what we see is here are all those TRs and rows. So what we're seeing is the result of the PHP, right? So this is the result. This right here is the result of this for loop, printing all that out. And of course, I can try other examples as well. I'll show you some of the others we can do. Not going to worry about. We're not going to talk about cookies. The cookies generally aren't a good idea, so I'm not going to waste any time on them. Yeah, I'm not going to bother with it. What's this been doing? Oh, this is inserting into a context. Okay. So what I'll do is I'll go back. I'm going to show you my version once that page finishes downloading. This stuff here is a little too complicated. So I'll show you my version. Of course, now I can go back here and I can change this to say just title, click subquery, select submit query, and we get just the title. Again, I can go back and say just the ISBN, and then I get just the ISBN. Okay? Any questions so far? Okay, let me just take